Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, the ultimate gateway for non-anime fans into the world of anime was Cowboy Bebop. It's still remembered fondly today for its smooth animation, jazzy soundtrack, and space western aesthetic. But this video isn't about Cowboy Bebop. Nope, it's about a sort of sister show. This is about Trigun, and more specifically, the reboot that just came out. Back in the old days of Toonami, both shows were popular for their similar aesthetic. Of course, Trigun leaned harder into the western part of space western, with the soundtrack and character designs inspired by old Wild West films. There are also some similarities between character dynamics in Trigun and Cowboy Bebop. For example, Spike, Julia, and Vicious from Bebop make interesting parallels between Vash, Rem, and Knives from Trigun. They both even have scenes where the main character casually wanders into a hostage situation while wearing headphones. Of course, these days Trigun doesn't get talked about as much, but with this new reboot, maybe that will change. So without further ado, let's get into the history of Trigun. Trigun is the creation of Yasuhiro Naito, and it began serialization in 1995 in Monthly Shounen Captain, and after that magazine stopped publishing, the series was rebranded as Trigun Maximum in 1997 and began publication again in a new magazine. The world of Trigun is set on a different desert planet, and our hero is Vash the Stampede. He's a happy-go-lucky pacifist who seems to be a bit of an idiot when we first meet him. Despite his pacifism, trouble always seems to follow him, and more importantly, collateral damage. Because of this, Vash has racked up a bounty worth billions of dollars, and a pair of insurance investigators named Meryl and Millie are sent to look into it. Along the way, they're also joined by a cynical priest named Nicholas D. Wolfwood, whose ideals are occasionally at odds with Vash. At least, that's the setup at first. As Trigun goes on, we slowly learn about Vash's past. More importantly, it turns out that Vash has a psychotic twin brother named Millions Knives, who will stop at nothing to completely crush Vash. The show's tone gets much darker once we're introduced to Knives and his gang of outlaws. Now, all of that is about the old Trigun. If any of that sounded interesting, we recommend checking it out for yourself. But the focus of this video will be on the brand new anime Trigun Stampede. There's a lot to look forward to and a bit to be a little more cautious about, but we'll get to that in a bit. Here are a few things you need to know about Trigun. First, it's obviously a complete reboot. When it was first announced, some fans thought it would be retelling closer to the original manga, similar to Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. You see, the original Trigun is in a situation similar to FMA. When the anime was picked up in 1998, Trigun didn't actually have enough manga to adapt a full story. Since the manga was nowhere near close to the end, the team behind the anime created an original ending. It's generally considered to be one of the better examples of anime heavily deviating from the manga. Meanwhile, the manga kept up publication until its own different ending in 2007. But Trigun Stampede is setting itself apart from both the manga and original anime in several ways. It seems like it will be taking place in its own continuity. Of course, it does seem to be taking a few cues from the manga, specifically including some things that weren't in the original anime. For example, some trailers have shown the characters of William Conrad and Zazie the Beast. Conrad is a man involved in Vash's backstory who is never in the anime, while Zazie is a secondary antagonist who is a one-off villain in the anime. But they were a much more important character in the manga. Another important note is that this version of the story takes place at an earlier point in Trigun's timeline. That's right, it's a prequel and a reboot. The second trailer mentions the fact that Knives had been seen in the city of July. In the backstory of the series, July had been completely destroyed in a fight between Vash and Knives. So we may be dealing with a younger and more inexperienced version of Vash here, which certainly would also explain the radical redesign he went through. Plus, seeing the infamous Battle of July City play out could be interesting. The reboot is also a lot more serious from the get-go. The original series had a more relaxed first half, with goofy standalone adventures, and took its time before we found out about Knives. Here, we're jumping straight into the action. Knives has already been introduced in the first episode and looks to be a main antagonistic force throughout the whole series. Of course, a reboot of a beloved anime isn't without its fair share of criticism, and we have to admit some of the changes they made do seem a bit odd. But at the time of writing this, only the first episode is out, so it may be a bit too early to tell. But from what we've seen so far, we like it. The first major criticism fans tend to bring up is how the new anime uses all CGI character models. Now, we know CGI anime has a pretty bad reputation, but in the right hands, it could also look great. Just take a look at Beastars or how Chainsaw Man uses CG in its action scenes. Plus, the anime is being handled by Studio Orange, a company specializing in CGI. They're the same ones behind The Land of Lustrous, which may be one of the best examples of CGI character models in anime. While it did take a moment to get used to, when we watched the first episode, we were so caught up in the story that the CGI didn't bother us that much. They do a really good job at making the CGI look natural and not distracting. You can tell bad and good CGI apart by how the characters move. Typically, bad CGI tends to be stiff and robotic. It's why early Pixar movies, like Toy Story or A Bug's Life, featured non-human characters. It was to hide how unnatural these movements would look on a human. But here, we think it's safe to say that Trigun is in safe hands. The second issues people have are with the new character designs. In particular, Vash's design, and we can definitely see why. Vash's original hairstyle and jacket were iconic, and the redesigns are a little unusual, but that's not a total departure either. Vash's hair has looked similar during episode 25 of the original series. And admittedly, Vash had a pretty 90s design. 90s anime was basically the peak of spiky anime hair, and Vash's hair is a prime example of that. So maybe the update for a modern audience makes some sense. Plus, since this is a sort of prequel, there's always the chance that we'll see Vash get his iconic hair throughout the course of the story. Maybe either during or after the July incident. The final problem that people have been discussing is that a certain character from the original is missing. The first episode introduced us to Vash, Knives, Meryl, and Vash's mother, Rem, and the trailers have confirmed that Wolfwood will also show up. Even Knives' right-hand man, Legato Blue Summers, is confirmed to make an appearance, but one character has been conspicuously absent from it all: Meryl's partner, Millie Thompson. Millie was something of a fan favorite thanks to her optimistic and somewhat childish personality. But so far, Millie is absent from both the marketing and the actual show. Here, the role of Meryl's partner is being filled by a new character named Roberto De Niro. Yeah, like the actor. In this version, Meryl is a reporter instead of an insurance agent, and Roberto is a mentor to her. His mature, world-weary attitude seems to work as a foil to Meryl's younger, more energetic personality. It's a bit disappointing to see that Millie doesn't seem to be involved. After all, she was a fun character and had a great dynamic with Meryl. Plus, she was important to Wolfwood's character arc. Of course, there's still a chance that she'll be introduced later in the anime, and the trailers don't want to reveal her just yet. Whatever the case, we're remaining cautiously optimistic with Trigun Stampede. When it comes to reboots, some changes have to be made. Otherwise, it runs the risk of just being a boring repeat of the original. But at the same time, too many changes risk alienating the audience. This reboot has a tough balancing act going on. They've got to appeal to fans of the original Trigun while also trying to hook in a new generation of fans who may not have heard of Trigun at all. Despite all of the changes that we've seen, we're enjoying the reboot so far. It does seem like the people behind the new anime understood what made Trigun great. Vash is still his same old optimistic, somewhat goofy self, and the desert planet of Gunsmoke still has the same space western energy as before. Overall, we're excited for the new direction Trigun is going in. And although there are some changes, it really does seem like Trigun Stampede knows what made the original so great. And hey, at the very least, it'll probably be better than the Cowboy Bebop reboot we got.